So welcome again, everyone. And Rob, feel free to begin whenever you like.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Linsenmeyer. I'm at Northwestern. I was the director or the leader of CIRTL at Northwestern until last summer. Now my main activity is working with CIRTL alumni from all over the country. And what we've tried to do in the last 2 years is to build a network of alumni of CIRTL programs. So most of you or all of you in the room can become part of this network at some point. And we thought, since we have all these people who have been through CIRTL programs, it would be good to hear from some of them about the kinds of jobs that they do now and how their CIRTL training has impacted them. And they are not mostly in research teaching positions in R1 universities like the CIRTL programs are all based in. They have different kinds of careers, and those are the ones we wanted you to hear about especially. So if you could put the slide up, Kate. So today we have 3 people who have all been through CIRTL programs, who have interesting things to tell us about where they are and how they got there. Lauren Woods, who's the Associate Director for Teaching Development Pathways at UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago. Katie Dixie, who has a kind of a similar role at UCLA. And Eliza Chang, whose role is somewhat different. She's the first-year program manager in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at UW-Madison. So Lauren and Katie have many more hats that they wear, and I decided not to list all of their jobs, but they can tell you about those. So the way this is going to happen is that I will ask them each 3 questions in series, and so we'll hear from about some of their work and some of their background. And then we'll open it up for questions. So it's great if you leave your mics off while we're doing this, but we'd be happy to see your faces. That makes it a little more friendly and makes us seem like we're not just talking to the wall. So if you feel like turning on your mic, if you're not eating lunch, that would be great. So I think we could take down the slide and we'll just get started with questions. So the first question I'd like you to each answer is, what does your job title really mean? What is it that you actually do in your job? And where did you do your CIRTL training? And anything else you'd just like to add? Basically, what's your job and what's your CIRTL background? Lauren?
So,
Go ahead, Lauren. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to go first. Well, hi, everyone. It's nice to see you or be in this Zoom room with you. Yeah, my name is Lauren Woods, and as Rob mentioned, I'm at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and my title is Associate Director for Teaching Development Pathways and CIRTL at UIC. So a piece of my work is actually helping to kind of run and manage and develop our local CIRTL program. It's new. We've been a part of CIRTL for about a year. But then there's also a piece, so it's working to help develop teaching assistant training across campus. And I will mention that UIC, I'm a part of a new teaching center as well. So I'm in a teaching center, an academic professional, but also part of what I do, I have some teaching duties as well to teach graduate level, basically pedagogy courses. I've been doing this sort of work for about 5 years. I was actually at Northwestern before, so I worked with Rob, and I know Rob pretty well. And also there I was doing CIRTL stuff. So I think, I guess I kind of can talk about things, and I imagine Katie can as well, with kind of 2 hats, both as a CIRTL alum, but then also as someone who works with CIRTL, current CIRTL participants and alum. It's like kind of figuring out what their career path or journey might be. where I did my CIRTL training, I was actually a graduate student at Washington University in St. Louis. I finished my PhD in 2014. So I guess, and thinking about the session, I guess I'm moving from early career, maybe starting to mid-career. So I've been out of my PhD a little while. I did a TAR project in 2012. I was a guinea pig teaching as research student. WashU had just joined the CIRTL network. And I want to say that kind of the stuff that I see participants at Northwestern or across the network doing, way better than anything I did for my own teaching as research projects. So you all are doing some really great work. And I think I'll stop talking about myself there and hand it over to whoever's next.
Gets to go next. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Dixie. My pronouns are she, her. I am from the University of California, Los Angeles, where I currently work, but also did my CIRTL certifications there as well. So it's funny, Lauren and I have the same title, and that's because we were both given that title by the same person who actually moved to UIC from UCLA. But what I do, I work for SEALS, which is essentially our STEM education center on campus. And in my role of SEALS, I have, I'd say, 4 different things that I do. One is working as our communications coordinator for CIRTL, our CIRTL program, which essentially means I do a lot of the outreach and marketing for CIRTL, but I also teach 2 of our 3 CIRTL courses and help support students, run events and things like that on our campus. My another role is running workshops with faculty through my SEALS program. And so for that, it's, working with STEM faculty mostly, running workshops. This last year has been a lot of workshops, as you might imagine, about teaching online. I also teach the TA training course for the life sciences. And so I teach that every quarter, run a quarter system. And so that is another part of my role. So there's first-time TAs or graduate students. And I also help run an internship program for folks interested in teaching at community colleges and run what's called the Southern California Regional Collaborative as part of this larger Aspire Alliance. So I do a lot of different things, but what's really interesting is I actually did most of those things as a graduate student also. So I participated in the CIRTL program. I taught as a graduate student one of the TA training courses, which I actually did my TAR project in, and I was part of the internship program that I'm associated with now. So I graduated in 2019, and I've been in my role for a little over a year now, and I absolutely love everything about it. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk more. And I'll hand over to Eliza now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza. I also use she, her pronouns. And I am at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. And my title is first year program manager. And so I work primarily with undergraduate students in this role. I actually, to be honest, only started a month and a half ago. So I will share the insight that I have thus far into the role. I'm also happy to talk about, so before I came into this role, I worked at the Wisconsin Institute for Science Education and Community Engagement. And there I was the research mentor and mentee training coordinator, which is a mouthful. I'm going to put that in the chat. But as I was doing that, I was also working, that role was also a postdoc role. And so I was doing my training there, specifically in program development and teaching, working with, in that role, I was working with undergrads through faculty and staff. So everything in between grad students, postdocs. And then when I came into this first year program manager role, I realized I really love working specifically with undergraduate students and being able to mentor them in a different way. And so this first year program manager position is really focused on the transition into college for first year students. So doing things like early start programs, and then also teaching first year seminars and helping students to really get the lay of the land on campus and figure out how to navigate, where we are an R1 large public university, primarily white institution. So lots of navigation to be done there. I did about, let's see, so this role I've been in for a month and a half now. The With Science role I was in for 2 years as a postdoc, but I also started in grad school. So I started getting involved about 2 years before I graduated. And so that's really where I got my feet wet and started realizing that there was a whole new world out there other than trying to go down the tenured track. So very happy to talk about that process. And yeah, excited to be here and just learn from everyone today.
Well, that is a good lead into the next question, which is how you got to where you are, how you chose this career path. You were all graduate students in R1 universities. And so I think going into those universities, lots of people kind of expect I'm going to be a researcher. And you might do a little research on the side, but that's not your main job. So the question is really how you chose this path. And how your sort of background kind of prepared you for this path. So actually, we just heard from Eliza. So why don't you continue on that same theme?
Yeah, absolutely. And I realized I forgot to answer the last question in your prompt from the first question, Rob. So I started getting involved in CIRTL as I was in grad school at UW-Madison. And that's where I worked with, we have the Delta teaching program here at UW-Madison, and I did my TAR project here. And I think like during my grad school years, I really enjoyed research, but as I was going along, there were things that I didn't like about it as well, and that I started to realize, but I found that the parts that I really loved was the interaction with students. So whether it was mentoring in the research group, whether it was TAing for courses. And so I really wanted to explore that more. And so I got involved with doing some, I got involved with summer research programs and being a mentor there, as well as at UW-Madison, we have a series of courses that were developed here that are offered called Entering Research. So really getting students involved in research and helping them succeed in that environment that might be very new for them. And so I started teaching those and then eventually coordinating those as well. And being a part of, that was a part of With Science, and being a part of that community as well as networking with other people really helped me open my eyes to see that, you know, being able to do student support does not have to be in the, does not have to be only like academic, faculty. And in fact, is very much not always faculty. And a lot of academic staff have that role as well. So I think that was a really great way for me to transition, because I did get a lot of experience in With Science working with students, as well as working on sort of the administrative portion as well of program development. And really enjoyed that too. So that's how in this role now, I really get to meld those two together and do what I really enjoy doing.
Thanks. Katie, do you want to jump in next?
Sure. So for me, I knew I always wanted to have some sort of teaching as part of my future career. But as time went by, my PhD, I realized I did not want to do research anymore and got, really disillusioned and kind of in the throes of depression and thinking about dropping out and whether I wanted to do that. But I realized in order to teach where I wanted to teach, I needed to stick it out. And that's around the time that I found CIRTL. And I will say that it really did change my entire career trajectory, in that, one, I found community there of other people who cared about teaching, which wasn't really very common on campus, which was so helpful. But I also learned a lot about other different career options, right? And how I can make myself a more competitive applicant, and how I might be able to find a place in the world where I might fit in terms of my career goals. I knew I wanted to teach, and so I really explored a whole bunch of different options for teaching careers. Introduction to education research got me really thinking about how much I want to include that in my future. Like I said, I participated in the Aspire program, which is an internship about teaching at community college. But the one that I participated in was actually with professional development for faculty at community colleges. So through all of that, I also really got to love working with graduate students and postdocs because there tend to be a community that gets left behind or not really appreciated as much. And I kind of found a place where I could connect with people, but also be someone to help support them and mentor them through times that can be really difficult, because that was my experience. And so when I was looking for future career things, I was looking at a lot of different possibilities. And it just so happens that the SEALs had a need for somebody to run all of these different programs. And I was very familiar with them and they needed someone to do it right away. So I got very lucky and am very fortunate in what I do now, which is one of the things that I love about it is not only do I get to teach, but I also get to do a lot of other things in supporting and mentoring students. And every day is different for me, which I really love. And that's one of the things I love about my position, because it's a combination of teaching and running things and advocating and really focusing on equity and how to expand that on campus, being a leader. So I really love that part of my job. And that's where CIRTL kind of came in for me to inspire me to do that.
Great. Lauren, you're up.
Oh, wow. Man, it's like, what do I really appreciated hearing both of your stories, Liza and Katie, because I think there's definitely some common threads. And I would say, like all of you, I knew I really liked the teaching part and the mentoring part. And I was like, research, I don't know about this, but it took me a little bit longer, I think, to figure out what that could look like career-wise. And Rob, I think your question was, how did I choose this path? I don't think there was an intentional choice that was made. It kind of worked out, and I'll talk a little bit about, I guess, the choices I did make, and then kind of how things worked out a little bit. So, like I said earlier, I finished my PhD in 2014, and I was at a CIRTL institution that had just joined CIRTL. So as CIRTL was becoming a thing, I was kind of getting towards the tail end of my graduate career. So all of these wonderful professional development opportunities, there weren't as many back then. It's amazing how things have changed over a short time period. But I did try to seek out teaching opportunities on campus and find teaching mentors that I could work with. And so as I was finishing my PhD, I had no idea what I was going to do next. And I really kind of lucked into being able to do a research postdoc that was at a teaching institution with someone that I already knew. And so that is what I did for a couple of years. I was at Davidson College. It was a small liberal arts college. And so I guess what I want to say is, like, I did CIRTL, I did a TAR thing. I had no idea. I was just, this is cool. This is a way for me to do more teaching. But as I was finishing that second postdoc, I was looking at lecturer positions. I was looking at, I thought maybe I would teach at a private high school. And I saw a position open up. It was at Northwestern to be a CIRTL at Northwestern postdoc. It was posted on the CIRTL job listserv. And I was like, wait a second, I know what CIRTL is. They want someone to help doing teaching as research projects. I've done that. And so I was like, this actually sounds sort of cool. I'd never really thought about working at a teaching center. I never really thought about what that would look like. But I was like, this is a sort of thing that kind of combines these two things that are really important to me, teaching and mentoring, and kind of this new way that I hadn't thought about before. And so it worked out. So thank you, Rob, for advertising that position so I could have a postdoc and start doing this thing. And now maybe choose this, I feel like now I've chosen it as my career path, but really at the time, I think a lot of it was just knowing those things that were really interesting to me, teaching and mentoring that I was passionate about, figuring out ways to get new opportunities to do that. And then, you kind of hope that something works out that's in alignment of that. And so I would say there's things I've done now that have been more kind of intentional in choosing this as a continued path, because I guess, like as Katie was saying, and even Liza, like some of the things that they really appreciate getting to do, like it is kind of like the best part of teaching, and you get to mentor, and every day is a little bit different. And so that is also fun. And I think I will stop talking, but I'm looking forward to whatever comes next as a part of this conversation.
So my days are all different too. It's not as though only you guys in these advisory kinds of roles have different days. But That's a really great part of any job, I think. So you've actually all told us what you like about your job. Isn't there anything that's not completely great about your job? Like, I mean, maybe you do too much administration, or maybe there are problem cases you have to deal with, or I don't know what those might be, but somebody want to start us off on that? Katie?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I do a lot of the outreach and marketing. And we started off as kind of a smaller center. So I do still make monthly newsletters every single month for 3 different programs: SEALS, CIRTL, and Aspire. And I hate them. I hate doing them. It's not very fun. I'm not a marketing person. And so it was like a really interesting part of my job that I kind of had to switch and learn new skills for. And so that's one thing that has been a little bit challenging, but also really important, right? The outreach piece of this, getting the word out around campus, is so valuable and so important. And so it's something that you just kind of embrace as, I just need to do it. It's gonna get done. I just gotta force myself to do that. But another piece too is working, at an R1, the culture here is not very teaching friendly. It's not very like EDI focused as much, although there's been a big change in that the last year, I think. So working within that environment can be a little challenging, but I'm lucky to have a really supportive team and a new dean who's super supportive in life sciences. But I will say, still working with faculty, not the graduate students and postdocs who I love so much, working with faculty is a bit more challenging because they tend to be a little less open to ideas. And so I tend to have a very like humanistic, holistic approach to things. I'm very, in touch with thinking about mental health and talking about, taking care of yourself with my students. And that doesn't always go over well with faculty I interact with. So I'd say those are the 2 big challenges, that and also just like juggling all the different things that I've been doing. Yeah.
So Eliza, do you know what your challenges are, having only been in the job for a month and a half?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm dealing with some now, so I'll share what those are. I think, well, so far I've only worked with the early start program side of things in my position. And early start is just kind of unique. Students are matriculating in the summer rather than the fall when they normally do. And so maybe it's not specific to that, but there's a lot of coordination between units. So you got to talk to the scholarships office and the registrar's office and the bursar's office. And, everything has to kind of come together very well. And then otherwise there's lots of troubleshooting to do. And sometimes, as the person they're contacting, it can seem like it's maybe my fault that not everything is, fallen together very nicely. So that's definitely a challenge of just sort of administrative work and working with lots of different units. I would say just a note on like my previous job with science, some of the challenges had to do with we had lots of units on campus, and so each unit was kind of doing their own thing, and with science had lots of different programs that we offered. But in the research mentor and mentee training area, it was just myself and my colleague, and we got requests from all across campus. And so sometimes it was just the number of projects we had to balance, or the lack of resources or personnel and bandwidth that we sometimes have. So that was the other challenge that we had to deal with.
Ooh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I love yes, that juggling and wearing lots of different hats. I'm gonna echo those 2 different things. But one, I think what I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about, because all 3 of us are we're academic staff in some ways, and how the academic staff are classified changes a little bit at different institutions. But I guess I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges or differences that are, I guess, with academic staff compared to, say, like if you have a faculty appointment. And so one thing I want to mention is, if you're starting to look at academic staff positions and you're thinking about those and also thinking about faculty appointments, a lot of faculty appointments are 9-month appointments. So you might say, this is how much a faculty member is getting paid, but it's for 9 months. They're still working over the summer, but they might get like summer salary or something. I'd say almost all academic staff positions are over 12 months. So, we get vacation, it's great, no complaints there, but I want to mention that as a difference. And then I would say also, there's kind of a difference, and it also depends on the institution and kind of like how I would say academic staff are perceived, or kind of where they fit into the hierarchy. And so I want to say that, yeah, and it's different by different institutions. And I would say even by like departments that you're working with. And so I think, even though we all have PhDs after our name, we don't have the faculty appointment. And so that for some people that's meaningful, and others that isn't. And at the end of the day, I don't really care that much. And but I think it's just something, to be aware of if you're thinking about these sorts of things. And so you could, if you're thinking about working at a particular institution, you might want to talk to some people there to see kind of what it's like and how staff are supported and perceived. So I don't know, I'll just leave it at that, because I think
so Katie and Eliza were both nodding there, so maybe they want to chime in.
Can I add something to that? I think the perception part is really interesting, and thank you, Lauren, for noting that. And I think also the perception from students is a little bit different too. So like, even though I am also teaching a course, the course is very different, right? I'm not teaching chemistry 101 or something. I'm teaching like, how do you succeed in college? And I think they see that very differently, which has its pros and cons. I think both, they don't see you at the same level necessarily as like a professor. But on the other hand, it also makes it sometimes easier to connect with them, because they don't see you as someone who's like, at a higher tier or as intimidating as a professor. And so it's actually sometimes to my benefit that they will like come confide in me in something that they might not talk to like a tenure track professor might.
Yeah, really great point. And I again, thank you also for bringing it up. It definitely is interesting. And so Liza, like you said, students feel more comfortable coming to me because I'm not in that hierarchy, but I'm also not able to support students in some more official ways. And so like, I can't be a PI on something unless I have like a co-faculty there with me or something. I can't necessarily help them write grants or support them on that, even if it's about teaching, right? Or like their TAR project and they're trying to develop that into an education research project. I can't be on their IRB or anything to support them. But another piece, is like, even compared to teaching faculty, right? I have the same exact teaching load as them. I teach 6 courses a year, but I'm not quite in their echelon either, right? So I feel like I'm even looked down a little bit more from there. But I think luckily my center is fairly well received on campus and fairly well respected. And so it's not as bad as it could be. But I do think that the academic administrator position is in this weird limbo of you're both an academic appointment, but also staff. And so it's kind of in this weird gray area. So that's a really good point, Lauren.
Oh, I was gonna say, can I mention something as like as a positive to that though? Is I think one of the things that both Katie and Liza talked about is like, wearing different hats and making connections. And I think one of the things about being in this weird in-between space is that there's this opportunity to kind of like serve as a hub or as a point of connection and collaboration across the university. And I think that's something that I appreciate about this position, that I think that weird in-between space allows you to do. So I'll let you go, Rob.
Well, I was just going to pick up on this as well and think about, there's this potentially hierarchical difference because of the way universities are organized and what brings prestige to the universities and so on. So I think that perception is changing gradually, that people understand that there are people who are really good at this and that they have a major role to play in the university. But one of the things that comes with being a faculty member is often tenure. And so I'm just wondering what you see as the stability of your positions.
I can start if you want. And so I've been in my new position at UIC for about 2 months. And I would say that my perceived stability about my position at this institution versus where I was at Northwestern is like night and day. And that's one piece of that is that the University of Illinois, Chicago is, I guess the state of Illinois has a lot of state employee unions. And so faculty are unionized. Most of the civil service staff are unionized. I am a part of a class of employees that is not, but I think because there's such a big union presence, we also are given maybe some other benefits that wouldn't necessarily happen at other institutions. So basically for my job, which I don't think is very common for this type of position, they have to give me 6 months notice before they can get rid of me, is essentially like the way our contracts work. At Northwestern, that was not the case. I could have, so I think, that I think the perceived maybe stability is kind of related to maybe how your unit or other things are perceived based on, the entire university landscape. And so I guess I just want to say, like, there are differences. I felt both differences, and right now I'm feeling pretty good, but I think that's really unique maybe to the institution that I'm at.
We'd be happy to take Lauren back if she wanted to come. Katie or Eliza?
Yeah, so when I was initially hired, I was hired as a program rep and a lecturer. And so it's not quite the title that I'm at right now. And basically, I'm funded through a grant, which ends ends next year. But I'm also funded in part by the grace of our grad division, who decides every year that they might give us a little bit of money to help fund CIRTL, and through our life science department. So right now, my position isn't permanent, like as in terms of the position itself being there for all the time, but we're working on it. But whether or not I'll be in that position for a certain amount of time, I don't know how much security necessarily I have, other than the fact that I know my team and that they want to keep me, which is, really valuable. And so making yourself, an asset to the team, they're going to work their hardest not to let you go. And so, like I said, when I started, they didn't have this particular position that I have now. They made it so that I could fill that role. And so I'd say if you find a place where you fill a niche, like, don't be afraid to see if you can find a place or find people who can maybe make that happen for you to try and build that niche that you can fit. Because again, being valuable in that space and being unique and offering something unique and something really useful to them can really go a long way, I think. In my experience, I don't know, I have a limited experience, right? Because I only recently graduated and I'm very fortunate where I ended up, but I have seen that happen for some other folks too.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit too. Mine, because I started with the science as a grad student, and sort of similarly to what Katie was said, was providing things that were really helpful to the institution, and they basically created the postdoc for me. Like, this wasn't a postdoc position that they normally have, and they were like, we'd really like you to stay on. We can't quite pay you academic staff level salary, but we'll create this postdoc position for you, and then hopefully, the institution as well as the university will see that, like, this is an important thing that we need to continue doing, and then be able to fund you further. Now, unfortunately, with the pandemic, we had budget cuts, and that's just not happening. And then also there's some shifting at UW-Madison right now, because they are creating a new teaching and learning and mentoring center. And so there's like some movement going around in the different teaching, learning, and mentoring units. So my current position in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences is a permanent position. It's part of the academic affairs office. And so, like, they fund me, and then this is a pretty important position. And so because it brings in money for the university, getting students in early, having them pay tuition in the summer, And then it's also, really important for the university in terms of retention as well, because you're really helping students to onboard and then get used to the university and therefore hopefully stay throughout to complete their degree. So in that sense, I feel really secure in my position, but have definitely been in that place where, things really does depend on funding and where that's coming from.
Great. Well, we want to open it up for questions from the audience to follow up on anything or ask things that we haven't talked about. If you raise your hand, either in your window or in your participant, show up in your participant thing, or you could also put questions in the chat and we'll look at them.
I saw that Shamil was raising her physical hand, and it looks like.
Sorry, I missed that. Shamil, go ahead.
Hi, Lauren. So good to see you. Hi, Katie. Good to see you again as well. So I'm curious. I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who have done some sort of education-related postdoc, and it seems like they all stumble into it. Basically, I'm trying to figure out what value do you see in doing a postdoc and how does that help you? And then if I want to be intentional and try and find a postdoc, even a postdoc in a very particular location, how would I go about that? If you have any advice, that'd be really great.
It's a really good question, and I'm thinking about it because I feel like I am one of those people who kind of stumbled into a postdoc and wasn't necessarily meaning to go there. But I think it was helpful for me in terms of exploration. Because my position at WisScience was a postdoc position, I could very much say, hey, I want to get involved in this piece and try this out and do this professional development outside of my core work. And I think that would have been a little bit more limited. Like in my current position, it's in the title. I'm a first-year program manager. I have to work on first-year students. There might be a little bit less flexibility. And so for me, that was important because I was very new and still am very new to this area, the space. And I wanted to try out different things and be involved in different things and see what fit best for me. So I think the postdoc position for me was really helpful for that.
I'll add another great thing about being a postdoc. There are a lot of not great things, but a great thing is part of your job is to find another job. And that's I think really unique. And so I think you kind of do get to learn some things and try it out. And if you don't like it, well, you can go do something else. But also ideally that those people should help you apply for that too. And then in terms of looking, there's the CIRTL network job board. There's some stuff there. I would say your disciplinary field. I know Shamil, you're in engineering, so whatever that would look like for that. I was looking, my disciplinary background's in biology, so I was looking at kind of like the biology job listservs to look at other things. There might be other places as well.
Yeah, I didn't do postdoc, but I was thinking about it before I found this job. And I'd say one other thing that can be beneficial is it can be if there are grants that somebody gets and they need someone to work on it and it's a temporary grant, for example, that might be a place where you can at least get your foot in the door and see how that process works. We have a new postdoc now who's working on the grant that I mentioned before. And so that's been really helpful for her. And like you said, in the career exploration piece. Another thing is just, even though it's might not be a traditional research postdoc in your field, you still can find them in similar ways, right? So like networking at a conference or, finding job boards or, meeting other people through other people, like learning about connections and things I found is really helpful. So for example, going to a conference like SABRE, I met a lot of people who were doing discipline-based education research, right? And so if I wanted to, there were a few people there I might have approached to see, are you looking for anyone to join your research group? And so that's something that you could also do. The networking, I think, is really helpful, no matter what kind of postdoc you're looking for.
So we have now questions from Cassandra, and we'll do her first, and then we'll go to Amtal's question in the chat. So Cassandra?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So there was previous mention of the Preparing Faculty program. Now, do you reach across, or do you have programs that reach across, UCLA outside of that in preparation for graduates to teach?
Do you mean like collaborating with other institutions to try to find like teaching opportunities?
Yes, because that's how I actually found you. I found you in DC on a website that connected me to this program, and it was exciting for me because I was in a PhD program that was where I was studying theology, but I want to teach. So the PhD in theology did not allow me that channel to enter into that space. So I'm actually here in DC working, and so they have a program, but it doesn't seem as if it's fully developed. So the reason that I ask is that in trying to continue on the track that I was trying to be intentional on, how do you see that, or is that even available, or how would that be something that you could learn more about? Or there.
That's a really great question. And so part of my job is working with the Aspire Southern California Regional Collaborative, which is part of a national network, right, working towards something similar. But the regional collaboratives themselves try to work with different types of institutions within our region to try to build partnerships. And so we are actually in the process of doing some outreach to other institutions and trying to connect with them, learning about the different internship programs that are in the region. And so there are like 5 community college internship programs run by community colleges. And so bringing those in, running info sessions for them with our grad students and postdocs is something that we've been doing. And we're also working on developing a like career readiness course. And so trying to connect people that way, running panels and things like that, collaborating with our career center. As far as answering your question, I'm trying to think of a way to get more involved. And I think, Aspire is an example where there are a bunch of new regional collaboratives in different areas. There's one in Iowa and Texas, and Florida is a new one. So that's kind of an interesting model. I don't know how common or how common that type of program is, but it certainly has been really interesting, and I've seen it happening a bit more. But yeah, so as far as looking for them, I'm not really sure. I'd have to think about it. Sorry.
Okay. Kate, do you have the link to Aspire that you could put in the chat? Could you find that for us? So the other thing to note is that CIRTL, traditionally, this network was developed because people in STEM fields didn't get much of a chance to teach during their educational trajectory as graduate students. But CIRTL has expanded to some extent into humanities and other areas, and certainly a lot of the online stuff, like the courses that CIRTL offers online, would connect you to other people in the network and make some of these opportunities. So the massive open online courses that CIRTL runs, those would be great things to engage in. And sort of somewhat locally there in DC, the UMBC has a, not quite in DC, but pretty close. UMBC has a great CIRTL program. And I would encourage you to look on the CIRTL website and find the leaders of that program and see if you can engage directly with them, and you could just take the shuttle up there and talk to them.
Okay. And Kate mentioned that,
Sorry, we lost your voice.
oh, sorry. I was like, Kate mentioned that Howard is part of CIRTL.
Oh, Howard
but
is too. Yes, right. Sure.
yes, I actually work here, so I've been trying to attend here, and that's been a challenge. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it like here, considering they're, a little different than most, but thank you very much. But yes, I went to their website. You guys were there. I clicked on it, and here I am. But thank you very much for that. And thank you for that, Mr. Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how I forgot about Howard. We have a bunch of alumni from Howard in the Alumni Network too. Let's see, scrolling back here in the chat, Anchal, would you like to explain your question, or do you want me to just read it?
Sure. So I was curious if your position as advertised or otherwise required skills that you feel like your experiences as a graduate student or your PhD programs didn't adequately prepare you for. And if so, how did you develop those skills, whether it was on the job or through CIRTL or other resources?
I can start, or someone else can. Eliza, you want to go for it? No? Okay. Gosh. So I'm thinking back to like my first CIRTL postdoc. And there are some things that like, I was like, oh yeah, I can leverage my experience as a graduate student. So part of it was kind of like program evaluation, data analysis. I was like, oh, I've got some quantitative skills coming out of my PhD. I can talk about that. But, to be perfectly honest, and I would say probably most fields and careers and jobs that people have, there's a lot of things that you learn on the job. And I feel like coming out of academia and thinking about like faculty positions, you're like, oh, you're supposed to have kind of done everything first. I don't think that's completely normal in other things. So I think part of it's also thinking about what the job ad says, and then kind of thinking creatively about things you've done. Like I have had this teaching experience. I did manage this project. Maybe it was my research project, but it was project management. I can talk about that. And so I would say there were some things that I had already done. Some things, a lot of the marketing stuff, oh my gosh, yeah, that Katie talked about, that was like learning on the job and researching and finding other ways to learn about it, finding ways to connect with other staff that are in similar roles, whether at your institutions or other institutions, and getting involved in that way and learning. So that would be my answer, but I'd love to hear if Liza and Katie have things they want to add as well.
Yeah, so I will speak to both of my positions. So in my postdoc, I didn't know anything coming in, but it was really helpful to have the graduate degree or the experience because, well, particularly because I was working in the research area. And so having been a grad student, having done research, knowing the higher ed landscape was really helpful in, being able to relay that information to students. I did lots of CIRTL things during grad school, so I don't know that I would have gotten that through just the TA training that we take as grad students, but it was definitely through doing the Delta program and CIRTL that I was able to do professional development, specifically in teaching and thinking about backwards design, thinking about inclusive teaching or active classrooms. So that was a lot of development in grad school and then continuing into postdoc. And then something that was really helpful that I learned on the job during my postdoc was really the program development part. And so then when I moved into my current position, they basically told me we're looking for three things. You need to be able to teach, you need to be able to develop curriculum, and you need to be able to do program development. And I said, hey, I've got some teaching from both grad school and postdoc. I learned teaching development through CIRTL and Delta, and then I did my program development portion in my postdoc too. So I was able to sort of collect all of those experiences and then apply them to applying for this current position.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you both. And yes, marketing was a big one. And, you know, learning more about that was a little bit of mentorship, but also a little bit of research and seeing like how other newsletters are kind of organized and how people like word things and thinking about like what would catch my attention. But also a little bit about event organization. And so I did a little bit of that through participating on our grad student council, but certainly that's like another whole kind of thing, a skill that I didn't necessarily learn in my lab, right? The other is navigating the institution and all the different centers and players and pieces and knowing like who's above who and who do I talk to respectfully and call Dean so-and-so versus who can I just say, hey, Beth, can I contact you later? So I think that was another thing that was a little tricky that I didn't really know about navigating the politics, I want to say, of the institution. So that was certainly something that I had to kind of learn on the fly through mistakes. I will say that.
Yeah, and I think as Lauren says, you know, nobody really knows what they're going to have to get into until they do it, and we're always learning on the job. And boy, a research graduate training does not prepare you to be a faculty member either. You know? So there's a lot to learn no matter what career you go into. We have time for a couple more questions. I can ask one if there aren't any pending on the floor. I'm just wondering what you see as the growth and promotion possibilities from your jobs. Are you now stuck in this position, or you know, where would you be in 10 years?
I'm going to be the ultimate leader of the CIRTL network. I'm just kidding. I actually have no idea, but I think I just like, I didn't realize CIRTL, you know, I just did this thing once as a graduate student and it's kind of continued to be a part of my career. So I'm sort of joking, but I think it's true. Like you don't necessarily know where you're going to be in 10 years, but I think it's kind of finding things that are of interest to you and figuring out what those opportunities are. I think I do want to mention is that, so with, you know, if you're thinking about faculty jobs, if you can get one, then there's usually a pretty clear path to kind of promotion and growth, right? You get tenure, then someday you do all the things to become a full professor. I would say that is a lot less clear. At least from my personal experience, is if you're an academic staff, kind of what that looks like or how you navigate that. I think it also kind of depends on the institution that you're at. And so I think it's a good thing to think about. And I don't have a clear answer. I would say, you know, for me that involved moving, I think, you know, to a different institution, not to say that those things can't happen at the same institution. And you know, I don't know. I think it's something that I'm still figuring out. So we'll see what, you know, Katie and Eliza have to say.
I was just saying, I feel very much the same way that you know, that is definitely a challenge. Is there's not a straight path. But I think it's also kind of freeing once you kind of come to terms with it, because you can say, well, I can be whatever I want to be. And if this job sounds interesting to me, like I have the experience or the interest in learning about it and doing it. And so I think there's also like flexibility within that, but it's definitely stressful when you're doing the job search and you're like, well, what do I look for? What titles am I supposed to be searching? Or and so that's where I think exactly what Katie was saying earlier about like networking is so important. Just talking to people and learning about their jobs and, you know, asking them who they know and that kind of thing. I feel like that's really been how I've been able to progress in my career trajectory completely. So yeah, super important.
You know, part of that, it's not answering your question quite yet, but part of that too is finding someone who will advocate for you and like find those things So like I will bend over backwards for my students. If they're like, I'm looking for a job in this, I'm like, I will try and help you find that. And so I had somebody do that, right? Like advocate for me and look out for me for positions that might be interesting. As far as promotion, I mean, in the future, I hope to be doing a lot of what I'm currently doing now, but maybe with a bit more power and a bit more clout. But also, you know, maybe writing a couple grants, doing a little bit of education research. And when I mean grants, I mean like, you know, about furthering teaching professional development would be fantastic. You know, maybe going for that teaching faculty title instead of this like ambiguous one. So who knows? But those are some things that if I'm like pie in the sky kind of dreaming, that's maybe parts of it.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their knowledge about these jobs with you. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. We've got 2 more of these coming up, also not like traditional research 1 faculty jobs. Next Thursday and the following Thursday also at 1 p.m. Kate has put in the chat oops, it scrolled back. Oh, she's put now Kate, why don't you take it for a second?
Sure thing. So I just put 2 links in the chat. One is a link to where you can see information about the other 2 events in this series, which Rob just mentioned. And a little higher up in the chat, I shared a link to our post-event survey. You've also all got that survey in your inbox right now. So it's 1 required question, 2 other, if you feel like telling us more, go ahead questions. These surveys are super helpful, especially since this is only the first event in our series. So whatever feedback we can get from you to improve what comes next, we will be grateful for.
Right. Katie and Lauren have shared their email addresses there in the chat. They're easy to find on the web, actually, and I think Eliza is too. I found her today. So I'm sure they're all happy to talk to anyone about these issues. And I'll just mention that the CIRTL Alumni Network is up and running. If you're at a CIRTL institution and you've taken some CIRTL courses, and you know, we'd like to have you involved in that network as well. So I think thanks to the audience for being here, and we will see some of you next week.